Jiwoo woke up screaming the name of a man she had never met. She sat upright in her apartment in Mapogu, Seoul at 3:47 a.m., the name leaving her mouth before her eyes had fully opened, before she had fully separated from whatever place the dream had taken her this time. The name was not Korean. It sat in her mouth with the shape of something learned before language, before the particular language of this life, this body, this small apartment with its familiar dark and the Han River visible through the gap in the curtains and the Seoul night pressing quietly against the glass. She sat and breathed. The dream retreated the way it always did, not all at once, but in pieces, like a tide going out, leaving behind fragments she could hold before they too dissolved. Tall grass, a sky so large it had no edges, the smell of earth after rain, specific and ancient, nothing like the rain she knew. A fire, voices, and the man, always at the center of it, always with his back to her, always turning just as she reached him, always almost. She had been dreaming this dream for 8 months. She got up and went to her desk and opened the notebook she had started keeping in the second month when the dreams became too detailed to dismiss as ordinary. She wrote what she remembered: the grass, the sky, the smell, the fire, the name she had woken saying. She did not write the name down. She had never written the name down. It felt in a way she could not explain to herself and had not tried to explain to anyone else, like writing it would make it too real or not real enough, would fix it to this life in a way that felt wrong. She looked at the notebook, 40 pages of entries. The handwriting in the first weeks was hesitant, questioning. By the third month, it had become precise, the handwriting of someone documenting rather than wondering. The shift that happens when a person stops asking whether something is real and starts trying to understand what kind of real it is. Kim Jiwoo was 30 years old. She was a researcher at a cultural studies institute in Seoul. She studied memory, specifically the intersection of cultural memory and personal identity, which she had chosen as a field of study 6 years ago for reasons she had articulated clearly in her graduate school application, and which she now understood, sitting at her desk at 4 a.m., had perhaps been preparing her for something she didn't have a name for yet. She had never been to Africa. She had never had a particular interest in Africa, not disinterest either. Simply no specific pull, no reason for the continent to occupy more of her awareness than any other place she hadn't been. She had studied in Seoul, vacationed in Japan, and once in Portugal, built her life in the specific geography of this city with the ordinary assumption that a life is built where you are. And then the dreams had started. The first one she dismissed, a vivid dream, unusual in its sensory detail, easily explained by the documentary she had watched the week before about sub-Saharan ecosystems. The second one, she noted. The third one, in which she had spoken in a language she did not know and understood everything she said, she wrote down in the margin of a work notebook because she had not yet bought the dedicated one, writing fast before it left her, filling half a page with details that still had not left her 7 months later. By the fourth month, she had started researching, not obsessively. She was a researcher by training and understood the difference between inquiry and fixation, tried to maintain the former while monitoring herself for the latter. She read about Zulu language and history and landscape. She watched documentaries. She looked at photographs of KwaZulu-Natal and felt, looking at certain images, the hills, the particular quality of light in the late afternoon, the dense green of the valleys. A recognition so physical it presented as sensation rather than thought. Not nostalgia, which was the word everyone reached for when she cautiously described it to the one person she had told. Nostalgia implied a memory of something experienced. This was different. This was the body knowing something the mind had no record of. The one person she had told was her colleague Dr. Park Sun-hee, who studied past life regression in traditional Korean shamanistic practice, and who had listened to Jiwoo describe the dreams with the careful attention of someone who had heard similar accounts before. "I'm not telling you what it is," Sun-hee had said. "I'm telling you not to dismiss it. The body doesn't generate this level of detail from nothing." Jiwoo had not dismissed it. She had also not told anyone else. 8 months in, the dreams had begun to change. For 7 months, they had been consistent. Same landscape, same quality of light, same peripheral presence of a community whose faces she couldn't hold on to after waking, same man with his back to her. In the last 3 weeks, something had shifted. The man had begun to turn. Not completely. Not yet. But the fraction of turning increased each time, like something approaching across a very long distance, like a resolution coming into focus from a great way off. She was still sitting at her desk when her phone showed 6 a.m. She made tea and stood at her window and watched Seoul wake up, the lights coming on, the first traffic, the river catching the early light in segments, and thought about the name she had woken saying. Said it quietly to herself once in the empty apartment. It felt in her mouth like it had always been there. The conference was not something she had planned around. It arrived in her professional calendar the way such things did, an invitation to present her research at an international cultural memory symposium in Seoul. Researchers from 14 countries, 3 days of papers and panels, and the specific productive friction of people who had spent years thinking about similar questions from very different angles. She presented on the second day. Afterward, during the coffee break, she was standing at the window of the conference center. She often found windows at crowded events, another thing she had in common with people who processed the world in a particular way, when she became aware of someone nearby. She turned. He was looking at her with an expression she had no framework for. Not attraction, not recognition in the ordinary sense, something older and more disoriented than either. He was tall, dark-skinned, with the kind of face that suggested he had grown up outdoors, in a place where the light was different from Seoul's. He was wearing a conference lanyard. He was very still. "I'm sorry," he said in English, because English was the conference language and she had presented in English. "I don't mean to. I apologize. I'm staring. I'm aware I'm staring." "Yes," she said carefully. "You are. You look." He stopped. He pressed his lips together. He had the look of a man trying to be rational about something that was not behaving rationally. "Your presentation," he said, starting differently, "about memory that precedes personal experience, the theory about embodied cultural inheritance." "Yes," she said. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to understand that I am a serious academic and I have never said anything like what I'm about to say to a stranger at a conference." She looked at him carefully. Her pulse was doing something she didn't have immediate language for. "Ask," she said. "Have you ever dreamed about a place you've never been?" he said. "Specifically, a landscape, a community, a fire, a specific quality of evening light." He paused. "A name." The coffee cup in her hand was very still. "Why are you asking me that?" she said. Her voice was completely controlled. Everything underneath it was not. "Because," he said, and his voice had changed, the academic framing gone, something more fundamental underneath it. "I have been dreaming about a woman I have never met for 8 months, and she looks exactly like you." The conference sounds continued around them. Voices, the clink of cups, the door opening and closing. Seoul went about its enormous ordinary business outside the window. Jiwoo stood very still and felt something she could only describe later, in the notebook, as the sensation of two separate rivers meeting. The turbulence of it, the way the waters resisted and then didn't, the way the combined thing moved differently than either had alone. "8 months," she said. "8 months," he confirmed. "What is your name?" she asked. "Sibusiso," he said. "Sibusiso Dlamini. I'm a historian, University of KwaZulu-Natal." She felt the name land in her the way a key lands in a lock it was made for. Not dramatic, just precise, just right, just the specific fit of a thing finding its place. "I'm Jiwoo," she said. "Kim Jiwoo." He looked at her for a moment. "I know," he said. "I've known your name for 8 months. I just didn't know it was Korean." They found a table away from the main crowd. The coffee break extended into lunch, and neither of them noticed. He talked about his research. He studied oral history traditions in Zulu culture, specifically the preservation of memory across generations, the way communities encoded experience into story and passed it through time in the bodies of their descendants. She talked about her work, cultural memory, embodied inheritance, the question of whether memory could exist in a person who had not lived the original experience. They were, she realized, approaching the same question from opposite ends. Tell me about the dreams, he said. Not demanding. The way you ask someone to share something you understand is significant. She told him. All of it. The grass, the sky, the smell of rain on earth, the fire, the community she could sense but not see clearly, the man always turning. She watched his face as she spoke and watched something move through it. Not surprise, which would have been the ordinary response, but a slow, deep recognition, the expression of someone hearing a story confirmed rather than heard for the first time. The hill with the flat top, he said when she described the landscape. To the east, with the two trees on the ridge. She stared at him. Yes, I know that hill, he said. I grew up 40 kilometers from it. My grandmother's homestead is in that valley. She felt the world rearrange itself slightly, the way it does when something you have been holding in the uncertain category suddenly moves into the real one. What do you dream? She asked him. Describe it. He was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. A woman, he said. Always at the edge of the fire, not one of the women I know, not anyone from the community. Different, smaller, with eyes that... He stopped. He looked up at her directly. With your eyes, he said. For 8 months I have been dreaming about a woman at the edge of a fire in my grandmother's valley, and she has your eyes, and I have woken from every dream with the certainty that I was supposed to find her and the complete absence of any rational framework for what that meant. And now you've found her, Jiwoo said. And now I've found her, he said, at a conference in Seoul, which is, I want to be honest with you, not how I expected this to resolve. How did you expect it to resolve? He looked at her with a directness that was cultural and personal at once, a man from a tradition that understood looking as communication, that had not learned the habit of deflecting eye contact when things became serious. I didn't know how, I just knew it would. That's the part I couldn't explain to anyone. The certainty, not hope, certainty. She understood this. She had not been able to explain it either. The certainty beneath the mystery, the way the dreams never felt like confusion, but like instruction, like something being transmitted with patience toward a recipient who was not yet ready to receive it fully. I want to ask you something, she said, and I need you to answer honestly, even if the honest answer is that you don't know. Yes, he said. The man in my dream, she said. He is always turning, always almost facing me. I have never seen his face. She looked at Sibusiso directly. 8 months, one recurring figure, always at the center, always turning. He held her gaze without flinching. What are you asking me, Jiwoo? She had never heard her name in his voice before. It landed differently than it ever had. I'm asking, she said carefully, whether you think it's possible that the man in my dream and the woman in yours are not strangers finding each other. I'm asking whether you think it's possible they already know each other, that they have always known each other, that what we're doing right now is not beginning something, but continuing something that... She stopped. She was a researcher. She was precise with language. I don't have a word for what I'm trying to say. I do, he said, in Zulu. He said a word she had never heard in this life. It was not a long word. It moved through the air between them with the ease of something that had been waiting for its moment. She felt it in her chest like a bell struck from the inside. What does it mean? She asked, though her body already knew. It means the soul that was with you before, he said. The one that was with you before this life and will be with you after. Not a romantic concept originally. It's broader than that. It means the essential companion, the one your spirit recognizes across any distance. He paused. The one you dream about before you meet them. Jiwoo sat in the conference room in Seoul with the city outside and her whole rational professional framework arranged carefully in her mind, and felt it hold, not collapse, felt it hold and expand, make room, accommodate what was being asked of it. She was a researcher. She had spent 6 years studying the membrane between personal and cultural memory, the places where the two could not be separated. She had written papers arguing that memory was not purely individual, that the body carried histories it had not personally experienced, that the boundary between one life and the lives that preceded it was more permeable than Western epistemology generally allowed. She had argued all of this academically. She had never expected to live it at a coffee break at a symposium in Seoul. In your grandmother's valley, she said, the homestead. Yes. Has anyone in your family's oral history, has anyone ever described a woman who came from far away, who wasn't from the community? He looked at her for a long time. His stillness was not the stillness of someone withholding. It was the stillness of someone deciding how much truth the moment could hold. My grandmother, he said slowly, has a story she tells on specific occasions. Not often. A story that was given to her by her grandmother, who received it from hers, about a woman who came to the valley and stayed one season and left something behind that the community kept. A song, a way of doing a particular thing, a quality of presence that the story says was unlike anything from that land. He paused. The story says she came from so far away that her origin had no name in any language the community knew. Jiwoo felt the hair on her arms rise. What did she look like? She asked. In the story. He looked at her steadily. Smaller, he said, with eyes that didn't match the world around her, eyes that looked like they were seeing two places at once. The coffee cups between them had gone cold. Seoul moved outside the window. Inside, something ancient and patient and entirely indifferent to rational frameworks settled between them, like a thing that had been traveling for a very long time and had finally, after great distance, arrived. I need to ask you something, Sibusiso said. His voice was quiet and careful in the way of a man who had grown up in a tradition that understood the weight of certain questions. And you don't have to answer. Ask, she said. If I told you that I'm going back to KwaZulu-Natal in 2 weeks, he said, and that I would like you to come, not as anything that needs a name, just to see the valley, the hill with the flat top, the two trees on the ridge. He paused, just to stand in the place you have been dreaming about and see what it tells you. She looked at him. 30 years old, a researcher in Seoul who studied memory and had spent 8 months dreaming in a language she didn't speak about a place she had never been. A woman who had woken at 3:47 a.m. saying a name that now sat in the room with them like something that had always been there. She thought about the notebook on her desk. 40 pages. 8 months. She thought about the man in the dream, always turning, always almost. She looked at Sibusiso, this stranger who was not a stranger, this man from a valley she had never visited and somehow knew, this man whose grandmother kept a story about a woman who came from so far away, her origin had no name. I have never been to Africa, she said. I know, he said. But I know the smell of rain on the ground in your valley, she said. I know the quality of light in the late afternoon. I know the sound of the fire. She paused. I know a name I have never said out loud to anyone. He waited. She said it. The word entered the room and settled. Sibusiso closed his eyes for one moment. Not long, just the length of a breath, just long enough for something old and recognizing to pass across his face. When he opened them, he looked at her and said, very quietly, that was my great-great-grandfather's name. Soul kept moving outside the window. The conference kept going in the rooms around them. The whole rational world continued its ordinary operations. And Kim Jiwoo, who had never been to Africa, who had spent 8 months dreaming in Zulu about a valley she had no reason to know, sat across from a man who had been dreaming about her eyes for exactly as long, and felt something inside her turn. Fully, finally, the way things turn when they have been turning for a very long time, and face her. She had never been to Africa, but Africa had never stopped being home.